Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of Game 2 of the 2021 World Championship match between World Champion Magnus Carlsen and his challenger Ian Nepomniachtchi. The game was played on Saturday, November 27th in the Conference Center in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. The first game had finished in a draw. The link to my video on that game is up here. And in Game 2 the champion was white and the challenger was sitting behind the black pieces. This is the handshake before the game and let's see what happened. Carlsen opened with a d-pawn, knight f6, and we get a queen's gambit, transposing to a Catalan with g2, g3. Bishop e7 and there goes that bishop on the long diagonal. What did the 15th world champion Viswanathan Anand think of this position?
So quite interesting so far. Not an opening I would have predicted. Catalan didn't come up. In fact, the Catalan is the white equivalent of the Grunfeld. So in fact, they have simply swapped roles.
Let's continue. Both players castled and black took on c4. And white won't get that pawn back very easily. Queen c2 is attacking the pawn, but b5 came and now knight e5. That is a very rare move. Like in game 1, Carlsen plays a rare move in the opening to surprise his opponent. And again, like in game 1, he's giving up a pawn for some compensation. One point of course is now the bishop on g2. That Catalan bishop is attacking the rook in the corner. Let's look at a tweet from the challenger for the world title back in 1993, Grandmaster Nigel Short. He said any Joe Bloggs or Richard Head can play the top engine choice, but we see for the second day running Magnus Carlsen quite deliberately choosing to play suboptimal moves. It is clearly a strategy for the match. A more common move instead of knight e5 is to play a4 to challenge that pawn on b5, and then c6. That is a natural looking move, but it's actually a blunder. Because white takes on b5, c takes, and then white has a nice knight jump, knight g5. Attacking the rook in the corner. Black only has one natural way to save that rook, knight d5, but it doesn't work because of, do you see it? Exactly, checkmate. Nice little variation, but let's get back to the game. Knight e5 was played by Carlsen instead of a4. Now c6 is okay. a4 came now, and now knight d5. No checkmates on h7. Knight c3 and f6, kicking a knight back. Knight dropped back to where it came from, and queen d7. And here is a tweet from Grandmaster Jonathan Rowson on this position. After 11 queen d7, it is a richly unbalanced position. Conventional wisdom says white has good compensation for being a pawn down due to his lead in development, central control and black's brittle pawn structure. It's also true to say both sides are worse. Carlsen played e2, e4 here, and let's listen to Anand once again at this point.
But good, it's a very rich position, and it's really a clash of concepts. The Catalan itself is a clash of whether that extra pawn is more valuable or the time and the initiative is more valuable, and the control of the long diagonal. So we're going to actually see a demonstration of that today.
The knight is attacked, it went to b4, attacking white's queen, the queen went to e2, and now knight d3. Black now has the threat of b5, b4, pushing the knight back, and Carlsen played e5, bringing the bishop on g2 back to life. And if black plays b4, then the knight can go to e4, that's a nice square. Nepomniachtchi has to develop. Bishop b7, his queen side was still undeveloped. Carlsen took on f6. Bishop takes and knight to e4. Knight a6. As Anand said, black has to bring that knight into the game. Going pawn hunting with bishop takes d4 is not good for black. I'll show you one example. If white takes on d4, queen takes, bishop e3 hitting the queen, you can take on b2, swap the queens like this, but then there is knight d6. That is a very strong knight. The bishop is attacked, and if you save the bishop, there's a takes b5, and this is not playable for black. All his pieces, apart from the knight on b2, are on the back rank, and look at white's bishops shining through black's position. That was not going to happen at World Championship level. So after knight e4, as said, Nepomniachtchi developed his knight to a6. Here bishop e3 is the engine's choice, but knight e5 was played by Carlsen. And this is what Ian Nepomniachtchi thought about this move. That's an expressive facial expression if there ever was one. Carlsen said after the game that he had missed something here. Nepomniachtchi took on e5, d takes e5 and knight a to c5. Carlsen said after the game that he had missed this move. I have a little clip from the press conference at the end of this video of Carlsen explaining that. Let's listen to what Anand had to say at this moment in the game.
But here, knight e5 specifically, I liked it very much for white till I saw this move, knight a c5, and because of this trick that I go to b3. And it was only here that I really started to doubt whether this is as wonderful for white as I initially assumed.
So knight d6 was played, and now there is knight b3, and black is going to win an exchange. Rook b1 was played by Carlsen. Nepomniachtchi said that move was a bit too much and that bishop e3 had to be played to keep things under control. After rook b1, the move from the game, Nepomniachtchi took on c1, rook takes, knight takes and rook takes. Ian said that it's a pity that black has now lost both his knights, but the mission of the knights was to win material. And now black is an exchange and a pawn up. Rook a to b8. The question is, does Carlsen have enough compensation for the exchange and pawn he is down in material? It is clear that the knight on d6, which cannot be attacked by black's minor piece, is the pride of white's position and is the compensation for the material. Rook d1. In this position you and I would take the queen out of the discovered attacks by the rook, but we are not challenging for the world title. And Nepomniachtchi played bishop a8 instead. And now you and I would have taken on b5 with attack on the queen and then return to that beautiful square on d6 with the knight. But again, we're not playing for the World Championship, and Carlsen's move here was bishop e4. White has a kingside attack in mind with two of black's pieces far away on the queen side. c4 c3, a move that came as a surprise for all commentators. It took them a while to sort it out. The idea is to open the b file. Let me show you one variation to illustrate this. If white takes on c3, then there is b takes a4, and if white now takes on h7 with check, he wants to checkmate the black king. King takes, queen h5 check, king g8 and a rook lift. It looks very dangerous, that rook is coming to h4, but here we see the point of that c4 c3 move. There is rook b1 check, king g2, and it's black who wins this game because it's check and the rook on d4 is attacked. So that's one of the things that Nepomniachtchi had in mind when he played c4 c3. Let's listen to Ian at this moment. He calls the position total chaos.
He's shown to be a very ferocious fighter today, despite things going pretty against him at the start. He came back, and it's very unclear who is in the driver's seat now, and it's a total chaos.
Carlsen played queen c2 here, and that is attacking the h7 pawn with two pieces. So g6, and now Carlsen took on c3. b takes a4, queen takes and rook f to d8. That move is protecting the queen so that he can play the c pawn up. The queen will not be hanging then on d7. Rook a1, and for the assessment of this position, let's listen to Fabiano Caruana, the previous challenger for the world title.
So rook a1, I think is a good move. I feel like we're no longer in territory where white is worse, objectively, and practically probably also not worse. So it's complicated. White is probably also not better, or really has any chances to be better, but it's a much better situation than a few moves ago.
Nepomniachtchi played c5 as planned, and queen c4, keeping the queens on the board as black's king is somewhat weaker than white's king. Nepomniachtchi decided to swap on e4, and there is a little threat on f6 that would win the queen. And that's why king h8 was played, knight went back to d6, not f6, and rook b6 with the idea to give back the exchange at the right time, eliminating that very strong knight. Carlsen took the pawn on c5, rook d to b8, doubling on the open b file, king g2 and a6. That move is making sure the a pawn is not lost in some variations. Carlsen played king h3, rook c6 on move 34. Both players were getting a little bit short on time, but it wasn't too serious. The queen is attacked, queen d4, and king g8 out of the firing line of the white queen. c4 from Carlsen, queen c7 and queen g4, and that move is allowing black to give back the exchange. As Anand said, if Magnus thought he was clearly better, he would not play queen g4. Nepomniachtchi took his chance and gave back the exchange. That very strong knight is now off the board. E takes, c5, hitting the queen took that pawn, queen check, king g7 and rook takes a6. That is move 41. The time control is reached and we have an endgame with an extra pawn for white. With all pawns being on one side of the board, white's winning chances are minimal. Let's see what happened. There is not too much to comment on. Nepomniachtchi played rook f8 and he did not fall for the trap of taking on f2 instead. That would be a blunder because of the double attack. King h6 and the rook is gone, and black might think he can do the same with queen f1 check. That's also a double attack, but if he does that, then there is a checkmate at the end. Nice variation. Of course Nepomniachtchi was not going to fall for that. He played rook f8. f4, queen f5 check. The queens are coming off the board like this. Rook a7 check. The king does not want to go to h6. Standing in front of the pawn and goes to the back rank. The black king is now cut off, but the position is still in the balance. This is an easy enough draw for black in the hands of a grandmaster. King g4, rook b5, rook e7, rook a5, rook e5. Don't swap the rooks. That would be a big blunder because this king and pawn endgame is a win for white. So after rook e5, Nepomniachtchi went to a7 and that will enable him to bring the king back into the game. h4, there comes the king. h5, king h6, king h4. And let's look at the remaining moves. As said, this is not a position where white can really expect to be able to play for a win. Rook a3 check, and we had a move repetition with rook a4, and the players agreed to a draw. A very interesting, very complex game. Carlsen summarized it well straight after the game when he said, "I had no idea who was better and why." This is the handshake after the game, and we're going to listen to a few excerpts of the press conference. And we have the second draw on the table, but it was a very exciting game. Game 3 will be played on Sunday, November 28th, and I will be here after the game to tell you what happened.
Somehow the move knight c5 had just completely escaped my attention, so that was pretty unpleasant surprise.
Probably rook b1 was a little bit too much, so bishop e3 was called for to keep the things under control. And then actually after rook ab8, bishop a8, I thought black is nearly winning because, well, I mean actually it's a couple more moves for me just to start converting material like ba4 and c5. I mean, I should give huge credit to Magnus because he just played in a very interesting way. So this bishop e4 was a very nice resource, and actually it started to look really double-edged.
I hope you like this video and that you keep following the 2021 World Championship match with me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.